In the middle of the concert, the music stopped, Michael Jackson dropped his microphone and knelt down on stage. 80,000 people held their breath as the king of pop, tears streaming down his face, reached toward someone in the front row. What happened next would become one of the most powerful moments in music history, but to understand why this moment changed everything, we need to go back to how it all began. It was August 16, 1988, Wembley Stadium, London. The Bad World Tour was at its peak, and Michael Jackson was performing to sold-out crowds night after night. But this wasn't just any ordinary show. Hidden in the front row was a story that would transform not just one life, but touch the soul of the man who had already touched millions. Subscribe now and leave a comment, because what you're about to witness will show you why Michael Jackson wasn't just a performer, he was a healer. That afternoon, 12-year-old David Matthews sat in his wheelchair backstage at Wembley, clutching a handmade sign that read, "Michael, you saved my life." Born with spina bifida, David had spent most of his young life in and out of hospitals, enduring countless surgeries and procedures that would break most adults. His legs were paralyzed, his spine curved, but his eyes sparkled with a determination that defied his circumstances. David's mother, Sarah, had saved every penny for 2 years working double shifts as a nurse just to afford these tickets. She had watched her son fight through pain that no child should ever know, and she had seen how Michael Jackson's music was the only thing that could make him smile during the darkest moments in the hospital. "Mom," David had whispered during one particularly difficult night after his 7th surgery, "when I listen to Beat It, I forget that my legs don't work. I feel like I'm dancing." That's when Sarah knew she had to get him to this concert. She had written letters to Michael's management, to record labels, to anyone who would listen, explaining how her son's love for Michael Jackson had literally kept him alive during the hardest times. Most letters went unanswered, but one made its way to the right person. Frank Dilio, Michael's manager, was reviewing fan mail when he came across Sarah's letter. There was something about her words that stopped him cold. She wasn't asking for money or fame, she was asking for hope. A mother desperate to give her disabled son one moment of pure joy in a life filled with medical struggles. Dilio personally arranged for David to meet Michael before the show. But what he didn't expect was how profoundly this meeting would affect the performer himself. When Michael first saw David backstage, something shifted in his demeanor. The superstar who commanded stages and inspired millions suddenly became quiet, almost reverent. He knelt down beside the wheelchair and looked directly into David's eyes. "I heard you're a fan," Michael said softly, his voice carrying none of the performance energy it would later possess on stage. David's response was barely above a whisper, "You don't know what your music means to me, Mr. Jackson. When I'm in pain, I put on Thriller, and for those 4 minutes, I'm not sick anymore." Michael Jackson stopped mid-sentence and something extraordinary happened backstage. Everyone around witnessed a transformation that no one was prepared for. Something broke inside Michael at that moment. Here was this young boy, confined to a wheelchair, telling him that his music had the power to transcend physical limitations. Michael had heard millions of fans express their love for his work, but this was different. This was about survival, about hope, about the transcendent power of music to heal what medicine couldn't touch. "Would you like to watch the show from the side of the stage?" Michael asked. David's face lit up like a Christmas morning. "Really? I could watch you perform from up there." "Even better," Michael said, and something in his voice suggested he was already forming a plan that would surprise everyone, including his own crew. As showtime approached, Michael's team noticed he was more focused than usual, more emotionally present. During his warm-up routine, he kept glancing toward the corner where David sat in his wheelchair, taking in every detail of the massive stage production. The concert began with its usual spectacular opening. Fireworks exploded across the London sky as Michael emerged through a cloud of smoke, sending 80,000 fans into hysteria. Song after song, he delivered the performance of a lifetime, moonwalking across the stage, defying gravity with his dance moves, his voice soaring through hits like Billie Jean and Beat It. But throughout the performance, Michael's eyes kept finding David in the wings. He could see the boy's face absolutely radiant with joy, mouthing every word, moving his arms in rhythm to songs his legs would never let him dance to. Midway through the concert, during Human Nature, Michael made an unexpected decision. The song was known for its intimate, emotional quality, and as he reached the bridge, something in the crowd caught his attention. In the front row, he spotted a handmade sign being held up by a woman. It was Sarah, David's mother, holding up the very sign David had made. "Michael, you saved my life." That's when Michael realized that David's wheelchair was no longer in the wings. But here's the unbelievable part of this story. The part no one expected. Security had quietly moved David to the front row to be with his mother, thinking he'd have a better view. But Michael had assumed David was still backstage where he could bring him out safely if the moment felt right. When Michael saw the sign and realized where David was, he made a split-second decision that broke every rule of concert safety and protocol. The music was still playing, the band was following the arrangement, but Michael suddenly stopped singing. He walked to the edge of the stage, looked down at David in the front row, and did something that sent shockwaves through Wembley Stadium. He sat down on the edge of the stage, his legs dangling into the crowd area, and reached his hand down toward David. The music continued for a few more bars, but the band realized something unprecedented was happening. One by one, the instruments stopped playing until there was complete silence except for the ambient sound of 80,000 confused people. Michael Jackson, the most famous entertainer in the world, was sitting on the edge of a stage reaching toward a disabled boy in a wheelchair. "Come here," Michael said, his voice barely audible but somehow carrying across the silent stadium. Security rushed to intervene, but Michael held up his other hand, stopping them. This was happening on his terms. David's mother, Sarah, was crying now, understanding what Michael was trying to do but terrified by the logistics. How could her son, paralyzed from the waist down, possibly get onto that stage? But David was already reaching up. His face was streaming with tears, but his expression was pure determination. What happened next defied every safety protocol, every insurance policy, every rule that governed major concert productions. Michael Jackson, still sitting on the stage edge, grabbed David's hands and began to pull him up. Security guards, realizing there was no stopping this moment, quickly moved in to support David's weight and help lift him safely onto the stage. The moment David's wheelchair was lifted up and he was seated beside Michael Jackson on the edge of the stage, something magical happened to the crowd. The silence broke into the most thunderous, emotional applause Wembley Stadium had ever heard. But Michael wasn't done. He stood up, helped David into his wheelchair on stage, and grabbed the microphone that had been lying forgotten where he dropped it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to meet someone very special. This is David, and he has taught me more about strength and courage in the past hour than I've learned in my entire life." The crowd erupted again, but Michael held up his hand for silence. "David told me that when he's in pain, he listens to music and forgets about everything else. Well, David, tonight, this song is for you." What Michael did next broke his own heart and healed it at the same time. He knelt down beside David's wheelchair and began to sing, "She's Out of My Life," not into the microphone for the crowd, but directly to David, as if they were the only two people in the stadium. But here's what made the moment truly transcendent. Michael took off his iconic sequined glove, the glove that had become his trademark, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and placed it in David's hands. "This is yours now," Michael whispered, though the microphone caught it, sending his words across the stadium. "Every time you're hurting, you hold this and remember that you're stronger than any pain." By now, the entire crowd was crying. Hardened security guards had tears in their eyes. Camera operators were struggling to keep their equipment steady through their emotions. But the most powerful moment was yet to come. As Michael started to lift David back to return him to his mother, something happened that no one, not the crew, not security, not even Michael himself, was prepared for. David looked up at Michael with tears streaming down his face and said something that the microphone barely caught. "Michael, I've never danced before. My legs don't work. But if I could dance, would you dance with me?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Michael Jackson looked down at this 12-year-old boy who had redefined courage for him, and without hesitation, he knelt down again and put his arms around David's wheelchair. "You're already dancing, David. You've been dancing your whole life. You just dance with your heart instead of your feet." And then Michael Jackson did something that no one in that stadium will ever forget. He began to slowly move David's wheelchair in rhythm, gently swaying back and forth, as he softly sang, "Rock with You." The crowd, understanding what they were witnessing, began to clap in rhythm, turning the entire stadium into David's dance floor. For 3 minutes and 42 seconds, the king of pop danced with a disabled boy in a wheelchair while 80,000 people provided the rhythm. It wasn't choreographed, it wasn't rehearsed, it was pure human connection transcending every boundary that separates us. When the song ended, Michael hugged David tightly and whispered something in his ear that only David could hear. Then he carefully helped transfer David back to the front row where his mother was sobbing with joy and disbelief. The concert continued, but everyone knew they had witnessed something beyond entertainment. They had seen the power of music to heal, the courage of one boy to inspire a superstar, and the humanity of an artist who was brave enough to stop his own show to honor that inspiration. After the concert, Michael's team was in chaos. Breaking protocol like that could have resulted in serious injuries, lawsuits, insurance nightmares. But Michael didn't care about any of that. Did you see his face? Michael kept saying to anyone who would listen. Did you see how he lit up? That's why we do this. That's why any of this matters. David kept the glove for the rest of his life. He went on to become a motivational speaker, telling his story to thousands of people around the world. But he never sold the glove, never put it in a museum. He kept it on his bedside table, and just as Michael had promised, whenever the pain became too much, he would hold it and remember that he was stronger than anything life could throw at him. Michael Jackson changed his touring rider after that night. From then on, every contract specified that a certain number of tickets for each show had to be reserved for children from local hospitals, especially those with disabilities. He also established what became known as the David Protocol. If a moment like that ever presented itself again, his crew was instructed to support it, not prevent it. Share this story and subscribe if it moved you, because stories like this remind us that the greatest performances aren't always the ones that follow the script. The sequined glove became more than a piece of memorabilia. It became a symbol of the night that Michael Jackson proved that true artistry isn't about perfection, it's about connection. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most important person in an audience of 80,000 is the one who needs the music most. When David passed away in 2018 at the age of 42, his mother donated the glove to a children's hospital with a note that read, "Michael always said that music heals. Let this heal someone else." That glove now sits in the pediatric ward of Great Ormond Street Hospital in London, where children facing their own battles can hold it and remember David's story, Michael's compassion, and the truth that courage comes in many forms, sometimes on 2 legs that can moonwalk across a stage, and sometimes in a wheelchair that refuses to let physical limitations define what's possible. The impact of that night extended far beyond David or even Michael Jackson himself. Videos of the performance spread around the world, becoming one of the most requested clips in music history. But more importantly, it inspired countless other artists to look beyond their audiences and see the individuals within them. Michael himself often said in later interviews that the Wembley concert with David was the most important performance of his career, not because of the songs he sang or the moves he performed, but because of the moment he stopped being an entertainer and became human. "I learned that night," Michael reflected years later, "that the most powerful thing I could ever do wasn't to make people forget their troubles for a few hours, but to help someone remember their strength forever." The lesson David taught Michael, and through Michael's courage to break protocol, taught the world, was that real magic happens when we stop performing for each other and start connecting with each other. That night at Wembley, a disabled boy reminded the most famous performer on earth that the greatest show is often the one that happens when the music stops and the humanity begins.